Hi everyone, my name is Tyler and I'm here to help you get into your new 40k army. 40k as a hobby can be very expensive to get into, but my goal with this series is to help you get a full army going without having to break the bank. Before we dive into the list, let's talk about some basic rules that we're going to be using for the list building process here. Our first goal is going to be to keep it affordable and utilize box deals. For everything that we're going to be looking at today, we're going to be looking at it from an MSRP value from Games Workshop themselves. Now, I don't recommend buying everything MSRP from Games Workshop. Often, local hobby stores, eBay, Amazon, things of that nature will have much better deals for the kits that I'm about to show you. Our second goal is that we're going to be making the list in steps, starting at 500 points and working our way up to 1,000 points, 1,500 points, and 2,000 points. Our third rule is we're going to be avoiding Forge World and Finecast. Many Forge World models are often very pricey for the points that they provide you on the table, and the resin used can be hard to work with, especially for beginners. As far as Finecast goes, I just don't think that they're quite as high quality as the plastic models that you can get otherwise. Our fourth goal is to aim to make lists with decent competitive viability. We're going to be trying to make lists that can do well at casual tournaments, in your games with friends, or maybe even get you some wins at major tournaments. Our fifth and final rule is the most important one. Just because I don't mention a model in my list, it doesn't mean that it isn't good. The most important thing that you can do is collect models that you think are cool. There's an entire side of the hobby that has nothing to do with playing, and if you don't like the models you're painting and building, you're not going to get the most out of this hobby. Today we're going to be talking about the Tau Empire. The Tau can best be thought of as an alien conglomerate of multiple races trying to achieve what they view as the greater good. You can kind of think of them as like the Halo Covenant with all of the different species fighting alongside them. The Tau are made up of a caste system in order to try to make the best use out of all of the different groups of Tau, with Fire Caste making the best warriors, the Air Caste are their best pilots, Earth Caste are their best engineers and blue-collar workers, and the Water Caste are their best diplomats. The Tau are a fast-moving, shooting-focused army that really tries to avoid having melee combat, and they also have a very heavy mecha influence. Think your Evangelions, your Gundams, Code Geass, Pacific Rim. Anything big robot kind of fits that Tau aesthetic. So why should you consider collecting the Tau for yourself? For starters, Tau have one of the most distinct looks from the rest of the game, as they don't really fit the traditional grimdark aesthetic. You also have all of the various battlesuits which have very distinct looks from one another, allowing varied armies to look like a full force instead of 80 of the same model with a slightly different gun or sword. Tau also have a good number of auxiliary units, which allows for even more variety in army appearance and army composition. They're a fast-moving army with a lot of cheap resources that make it very easy to play an objective-focused game, while also having a lot of very deadly firepower that makes it easier to play a killing-focused game. As it turns out, having a fast gun that moves up the board very quickly and can get good angles is a lot better than having a slow-moving gun that can't get shooting angles. Tau also have a huge array of options with their guns, often allowing a single type of unit to fulfill multiple roles during that list building stage, whether you want them to be more anti-tank or more anti-elite or anti-infantry. Every single detachment in the Tau Codex is competitively viable, with some of the best stratagems and detachment rules in the entire game across them. If you want to experiment with these detachments, it's super easy, as the lists that you use for each of them can very easily swap between the different detachments without necessarily needing an entirely separate set of units, as the buffs that are given are usually pretty generic and pretty good for just about anything in the army. And finally, Tau are one of the easiest factions to magnetize, which is great because with all of these different options that you have for the units to fulfill different types of roles depending on what you need, you're going to want to wind up swapping them out and kind of mix and matching different loadouts all the time. There are, of course, a good number of reasons to not collect Tau though. As they are a Xenos faction, they get a lot less lore than other factions in the game like Imperium and Chaos factions. On top of this, many Tau fans are not very happy with Phil Kelly's Tau books, which make up the vast majority of current Tau lore. The Tau are also currently one of the most expensive armies to collect. Out of the 26 factions that are within the game, they are well within the bottom 3 in terms of their average cost efficiency. They can also be a very annoying army to paint without an airbrush, and panel lining for them can take a long time if you want to go that extra mile with how you make them look. There also isn't a ton of variety in types of auxiliary units that Tau can run in the game. While we did just get a range refresh and there are a lot more recruit options that are available to you, the lack of options that you have with things like Vespids or any of the other factions that are supposed to be allied with the Tau in the lore is pretty astounding. Tau are also, at the end of the day, a single phase army. This means that you're not going to learn things like the charge phase, you're not going to learn about things like the fight phase very well, and positioning is very important for Tau. This winds up making Tau one of the harder armies to play at a higher level, and also makes it so that they're a very hard army to learn the game with. The ease of use of Tau is going to change very wildly based on how much terrain is on the table, how experienced your opponent is, and things like that. They can also struggle against armies that overwhelm them with lots of units all at once or are focused around very durable units. Skewless do very well in the Tau in general because in order for Tau to kind of hit the entire field, they have to build their units in a way that makes them incredibly inefficient against targets that aren't their specific perfect ideal target. The Tau army rule is also very punishing. Going from a ballistic skill 3 up on a guided target all the way down to ballistic skill 5 up on a non-guided target for most of the army means that you're going to have to choose between either missing the majority of their shots that you want to have go into a more ideal target, or you're going to be firing suboptimal weapons into that primary target. Before we go too much deeper, I do want to say one quick thing. If you can find the old combat patrol with a Ghost Keel, Stealth Suits, Cadre Fireblade, Ethereal, and Fire Warrior team, I 100% recommend picking that up over the new combat patrol. The Ghost Keel was already a pretty good unit, which is a lot better now with the updated rules that we have. The Cadre Fireblade is incredible, Fire Warriors are incredible, Stealth Suits are one of the best units in the entire book, and even the Ethereal is actually a pretty valid unit now that there are other things that you want to spend your command points on. The new Combat Patrol, on the other hand, suffers from a couple of key issues. Number one is the fact that the commander that's inside of the pack isn't able to lead either of the units that are actually inside of it. The Devilfish just being a Devilfish instead of coming in with a Hammerhead sprue, which would give you access to a Skyray, Hammerhead, or Devilfish, also means that you're kind of limited into the Breachers in a Devilfish archetype. While that is an incredibly good archetype and is probably one of the best options that Tau has for a combo, it's also one of those things where the extra breachers that you get, you were already getting from the previous combat patrol. There are other options that you can do besides just having them be in a Devilfish every time, and you don't really want too many units of Pathfinders. The army rule for Tau is for the greater good. It is a lot of text, but the basic way to break it down is that you have a unit in your army that wants to shoot an enemy. Another unit in your army that has not shot yet can act like a spotter to make your guy shoot the enemy even better. Now, this does have a drawback of if you try to shoot at anything other than the guy that you are being told to shoot at, you are going to have a worse ballistic skill. But guiding at the end of the day does provide a ton of benefits. For example, it is going to make it so that your premier target is going to be much easier to kill. It's going to remove cover. And also there's going to be other benefits that you can pick up from the detachments that we're going to talk about later. Having enough spotters for your army is a very important thing because you are realistically only going to have a handful of units that are actually going to be your big damage dealers, and you want to make sure that they are able to get the most out of their damage turn after turn after turn. So if you don't run spotters that are those dedicated support units in your army, you are going to struggle. All three of the lists that I'm going to be showing you today are going to be starting off the exact same way, and you can realistically run these in any of the detachments. But for the sake of this, we're going to be starting off with the Kauyon detachment. The Kauyon detachment rule is Patient Hunter. Starting on the third battle round, every single ranged weapon in your army is going to have sustained hits 1. Or, if the target that you are shooting at is a spotted target, then you are going to have sustained hits 2. This got a very big buff from the index, as now the unit that is doing the spotting can also get sustained hits too, as the spotted unit is considered a spotted unit for both the spotter and the observer. This is just a flat out huge increase in damage. Every level of sustained hits can almost be thought of as having an extra +1 to your ballistic skill. So having a sustained hits of 1 will take what feels like a ballistic skill 3 up and make it feel like a ballistic skill 2 up. Or with sustained hits 2, your ballistic skill 3 ups will feel like ballistic skill 1 up. Now this can get even better than that with rerolls, and there are a good amount of ways to get rerolls in this army, so this really is a very good rule. You have to wait a little bit for it to kick in, but Tau has a lot of ways to speed bump the opponent. So to start off all of our lists today, we're going to be going out and picking up 1 Tau Combat Patrol and 1 box of XV8 Crisis Battlesuits. The Enforcer Commander is going to be equipped with a Cyclic Ion Blaster and 3 missile pods, as he's going to wind up going with the Fire Knives. This is going to give him a very nice little buff, as he's going to be able to reroll 1s, and he's going to be able to give them a buff back in making them feel more durable. The Breachers are going to be able to have access to a wide variety of drones, but the best drone is always going to be a Guardian drone for them, as it's going to give them a -1 to wound, which makes a very big deal considering how frail they are at range. Pathfinders are kind of one of your premier spotting units, and we're going to be giving them 3 ion rifles. You can give them rail rifles if you want, but in my testing in my own personal games, I've found the rail rifles to be a little bit lacking because the Pathfinders are almost always going to be moving around, and having 3 shots that hit on 5s feels a lot worse than having 9 shots that hits on 5, even if those shots are a little bit less valuable in general. The Pathfinders are going to be equipped with the Recon drone, as I do think that the Recon drone is the best drone option that is available for the Pathfinders. If you are running multiple units of them, you can look at the other options like a grav inhib drone, but for that first unit of Pathfinders, the Recon drone is almost a must. Having the combination of infiltrate and scout on the same unit is so incredibly powerful for what this army needs to do. The Devilfish is going to be driving around the Breacher team as the Pathfinders want to do their infiltrate, and it's also just a very good way of delivering Breachers to exactly where you need them to be, as they are very short-range units that pack a very powerful punch. And finally, Crisis Suits got a very big change in the most recent update to the Codex. They are no longer one unit that has a ton of different options, instead being broken up into 3 different types of options. So what we're going to be doing is kind of mixing and matching them depending on our point values to make sure that things fit in nicely. For 500 points, we're going to be running them as a Fire Knife unit with the 6 missile pods, 3 gun drones, and 3 shield drones, so that the Enforcer can actually have something that he's going to be able to run. Moving up to 1,000 points, what we're going to want to look at is going and picking up a 2nd Combat Patrol and 1 box of Stealth Suits. Stealth Suits are kind of your premier spotter unit, as they're going to enable whatever unit they are spotting for to be the absolute best that it can be. The Coldstar Commander is going to be equipped with the Missile Pod, Cyclic Ion, and Exemplar of the Kauyon, as he is now going to be leading the Fire Knife unit so they can get around the map a little bit more easily and get slightly better angles. The Enforcer is still going to be equipped with the Cyclic and the Missile Pods, but you can realistically switch this out for whatever you want. I kept it here for simplicity's sake and to kind of help out with the volume of fire issue that you can sometimes run into. And I've equipped him with Precision of the Patient Hunter to make it so that as a solo character who can drop in on turn 2 or turn 3, he's going to feel a lot better than necessarily just kind of having him run around and just kind of do whatever, or even try to redeploy units that don't really matter here. Like I said earlier, the 2nd Pathfinder unit can be swapped out to have a grav inhib drone, doesn't really matter too much, and both of the Breacher teams are going to be going inside of their Devilfish. Moving onward to 1,500 points, we're going to want to go and pick up 1 more box of Stealth Suits. We're going to want to pick up another box of Crisis Battlesuits. We're going to want to pick up 1 Ghost Keel and then round it out with a Hammerhead gunship. With 2 units of Crisis Suits, we're actually going to be able to have something for both of our commanders to be able to lead into battle. The Ghost Keel is a good general unit, especially in Kauyon, as it has specific stratagem support that it doesn't have in the other detachments, even though it is still perfectly fine in those detachments on its own. It's going to be having a Cyclic Ion Raker, Twin Fusion Blaster, and a Battlesuit support system. And then finally, the Hammerhead is going to be built as a Skyray gunship with accelerator burst cannons. It is very important to remember, with your Skyray gunship, do not glue anything down. The Skyray is the exact same hull as the Hammerhead and the Devilfish, so by making sure to leave it flexible, you give yourself a lot more options. If you made sure not to glue down all of the parts to the Devilfish earlier as well, you can also pretty easily swap those Devilfish around to be a Hammerhead using the leftover railgun parts that you didn't use for the Skyray. At 2,000 points, it's going to be pretty simple for us to round off our Kauyon list. It's just going to be 2 more Ghost Keel Battlesuits and 1 more Hammerhead Gunship box. Like earlier, the Ghost Keels are going to be equipped with the Battlesuit support system, Cyclic Ion Rakers, and Twin Fusion Blasters, and the other Skyray gunship is going to have its 2 accelerator burst cannons, and there's really not too much else to say here. The one big difference is that in terms of the leaders, the second Coldstar is going to have through Unity Devastation, which means that if this Coldstar leads for another unit, that unit's going to be able to have sustained hits and lethal hits, which can become incredibly powerful when paired up with potentially spotting for the first Coldstar's unit. The second style of list that we're going to be looking at today is the Mont'ka style of list. This is the exact inverse of Kauyon, as it is active during the first, second, and third battle rounds, but not the fourth and fifth. Every ranged weapon in your army is going to have the assault keyword, and during those first, second, and third battle rounds, while a unit is being guided, it's also going to have lethal hits. This means that Mont'ka is going to be moving up the board very, very fast. It's going to be very dangerous, and it really works nicely with a very big volume of fire, kind of shoring up the weakness that Tau can potentially run into with horde armies like Green Tide or Unending Swarm. At 500 points and 1000 points, it's going to be the exact same list as we saw for the Kauyon detachment, but at 1500 points, we're going to see a deviation. What we're going to want to do is pick up 2 boxes of Cadre Fireblades, 1 more box of Fire Warriors, 3 boxes of Broadside Battlesuits, and 1 more box of Stealth Battlesuits. The Cadres are incredible in Mont'ka, as they're going to take your Breachers and move them from 20 shots up all the way to 30. And there are not a lot of things in the game that like taking 30 shots from Breachers, hitting on 2s, rerolling 1s from Stealth Suits, rerolling all wounds with lethal hits. One of the Cadres is going to be equipped with the Strike Swiftly, and because of this, what you need to make sure is that this Cadre Fireblade and his Breacher unit are not inside of a Devilfish. That means that This means that the 10-man Breacher unit without a leader is going in one of them, and the other Cadre is going to be going into the second one with his 10-man. Because Mont'ka gives access to the assault ability just by default, you don't need any gun drones to do any kind of assault actions when in the Leviathan mission pack, and in the Pariah mission pack, things are changing anyways, and you're probably not going to want the gun drones on most of the stuff there, so you can swap out a lot of gun drones with shield drones for this army, depending on which one you're playing in. Now, broadsides with high yield missile pods, a weapon support system, twin SMS, and missile drones puts out a disgusting amount of shots. It's something around the ballpark of 36 shots pretty reliably, and these are all shots that are going to most of the time be rerolling all wounds because it's twin linked, pretty solid AP, good damage that can be boosted even further. Because it's Mont'ka, the broadsides don't have the same issues with mobility as they have in the other detachments, and they can be scout moved from Strike Swiftly, meaning that they can even more easily be able to get into position. Broadsides are not the best in most of the other detachments, but in Mont'ka, they really put in a ton of work. As we move on to the 2,000 point bracket for the Mont'ka detachment, it's going to be a pretty simple pickup. It's just going to be 3 boxes of Hammerhead gunships, and that is it. Just like in every other version where we've only had 1 unit of it, the Enforcer is not going to be able to have any units to lead for Crisis Suits, so it's just going to be a solo dropping unit that's a pretty solid threat all on its own. The Pathfinders are still going to be doing their Pathfinder thing, Stealth Suit's doing their Stealth Suit thing. The biggest difference here is that the Skyray gunships are going to be run as 2 with the Accelerator Burst Cannons and their regular primary weapon, and the Hammerhead is going to be run with Accelerator Burst Cannons and an Ion Cannon alongside its Seeker Missiles. You can theoretically swap this out for the Railgun, but because Mont'ka is already going to be enabling it to get lethal hits, the Ion Cannon actually gets a surprising amount of value here that you might not get if you were just running the Railgun. The final detachment we're going to be looking at is for anyone who just wants to run all of the big mechs because big mechs are cool, and that's the Retaliation Cadre. Its detachment rule is Bonded Heroes. Every single time a Battlesuit unit from your army makes a ranged attack within 12 inches, then you are going to improve the strength characteristic of that attack by 1. If you're within 6 inches, you also increase the armor penetration. This lets Tau hit a ton of crazy breakpoints, like getting fusion to actually wound a lot of vehicles on 4s, having burst cannons wounding things like Orc Boys on 3s, and also pushing things into armor penetration values that they wouldn't be able to normally get to, such as fusion having AP 5 and burst cannons being AP 1, which can really make a very huge difference. For Retaliation Cadre, it is still going to be that same 500 point list, but at 1,000 points we can actually start to deviate quite a bit. What we're going to want to do is pick up one more Commander, one more box of Crisis Battlesuits, a box of Stealth Suits, and we're going to pick up Commander Shadowsun for her reroll aura. The Coldstar is going to be equipped with Fusion Blasters and the internal grenade rack so that he can more easily run with the Sunforge unit and really try to synergize well with that unit. While the Enforcer is going to have the prototype weapon system and run with the Fire Knives so that he can get the maximum amount of damage on a lot of those more medium durability units that you're going to see flooding that midboard. Everything else about this is going to be pretty much the exact same as you've seen with all of the other different detachments so far. As we move on to 1,500 points, we're going to do a very similar pickup. It's going to be another Tau Commander, it's going to be another box of Crisis Battlesuits, it's going to be another box of Stealth Battlesuits, but we're going to go and pick up a Riptide Battlesuit as well. Now the Riptide and the Ghost Keel Battlesuit can be very heavily interchangeable, so depending on which one you like more, you can pick that up here, and it might change a couple of things like maybe an enhancement or two, but they kind of fulfill just about the same type of role of durable / annoying unit that your opponent needs to deal with, but is kind of not worth the time to deal with. Now points can be a little tight here, so we are going to have to run a second Enforcer Commander who is going to be run with the Fusion Blasters so that he can go with the Sunforge instead this time. Now the Coldstar can have missile pods and go with the second Fire Knife unit, and the Riptide is going to have an Ion Accelerator, Twin Fusion Blaster, and 2 missile drones. Do not think that the Riptide is a big damage source. It has been in previous editions, but is more of that kind of annoying durable meat shield that is going to force your opponent out of position to answer it. Its damage is substantially less reliable than the Fire Knives and the Sunforge, and so this should be a lower priority for your good spotting units, as well as probably one of the earliest things where as you start to run out of spotters, you just skip the Riptide getting the buff entirely. As we round out at 2,000 points, you're going to get a very serious case of deja vu as we're going to pick up a Tau Commander, a box of Crisis Suits, a box of Stealth Suits, and a Riptide. As we finally get to 2,000 points, we have enough points to work with to make 3 Commanders Coldstars, and you can see the loadouts here. The Burst Cannon with high out Burst Cannon and Cyclic Ion Commander is going to be getting a prototype weapon system, and he's going to be going with the Star Sights so that he can be a very incredible, dedicated anti-infantry killing unit. The Fire Knife is still going to be ran with the Missile Pod Enforcer and the Missile Pod Coldstar, who have their own benefits, like the Starflare Ignition System, to do a mid-game redeploy. And your Coldstar with the Fusion Blasters is still going to go with the Sunforge to be that incredible deep strike threat, given that the Retaliation Cadre can deep strike at 3 inches instead of 9 inches like normal. And that's going to be everything that I have for you today for Tau. They are my first love of 40k factions. They are my favorite army, and they are an army that I absolutely do not recommend anyone get as their starter army. As much as I love them, as much fun as I think they are way too expensive to have as that starting point, and they don't really teach you the game all that well. At the end of the day, they are still a very fun army, and if you do love them that much, do not let me stop you. But if you have other choices that are a little higher up the tier list in terms of what's affordable and what's not, you're probably going to want to go with one of those first. Because of their very high price, they are going to stay exactly where they were during the index video, and they're going to stay at the very bottom of that $900 to $1,050 tier. I'll be doing a giveaway for a free combat patrol at the end of this month. In the description, you'll find a link for a Facebook page where I'm going to be hosting the giveaway. All you have to do to enter on the day that it goes live is submit a picture with a model, an art piece, a drawing, whatever kind of creative thing that you can do with a name and date in the picture. Paid channel supporters don't need to worry about this at all. You will automatically be entered with extra entries based on your tier as a thank you for helping support the channel. Big shout out to all of my channel supporters who help make these videos possible, such as Comrade Chin, and everyone else who's been generous enough to support me. If you would like to try and help out the channel, please consider the links in the description where you can either check out the Amazon affiliate link or go support me on Ko-fi. Thank you all for watching.